Imagine carving an entire city into the side of a mountain. No cranes, no machinery, no blueprints, just human hands, chisels, and an insane amount of patience. Now imagine that city becoming one of the most powerful trading hubs in the ancient world, and then, almost overnight, disappearing from history so completely that the rest of the world forgot it even existed for over 1,000 years. That's Petra. And the people who built it? Nobody talks about them enough. Welcome back to Stories on Stone, where we dig into the history the textbooks skip over. Today we're going to Jordan, we're going back 2,000 years, and we are solving one of archaeology's most fascinating mysteries. Who actually built Petra? How did they do it? And why did they just vanish? Let's get into it. Most people know Petra from the movies. If you've seen Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade, you've seen that iconic golden facade carved into a rose-red cliff. But here's what the movie doesn't tell you. The people who built that weren't Egyptian, weren't Greek, and weren't Roman. They were the Nabataeans, an Arab people. And for centuries, they were basically invisible to historians. Here's why that's wild. The Nabataeans started out as nomads, desert wanderers. No permanent home, no cities, no nothing. Around the 4th century BC, they were described by the Greeks as people who were impossible to conquer because they had no fixed location. You couldn't attack a city that didn't exist. But somewhere around 300 BC, something shifted. These nomads looked at a remote canyon in the middle of the desert, surrounded by towering sandstone cliffs hidden from the outside world, and thought, this is home. And then they got to work. Here's the thing about Petra that blows people's minds when they first hear it. The buildings aren't constructed. They're not built up from the ground. They're carved into the rock. The Nabataeans literally sculpted their city out of the mountain itself. The treasury, that iconic facade everyone recognizes, is hollowed out of a single sandstone cliff. No separate stones, no mortar. They looked at a solid rock face and saw a building waiting inside it. Then they carved it out, top to bottom. And they didn't stop at one building. At its peak, Petra had temples, tombs, a theater that seated 8,500 people, markets, bathhouses, and homes, all carved into or built among those rose-red cliffs. But here's what most people completely overlook. The most impressive thing about Petra wasn't the buildings, it was the water. Petra sits in the middle of a desert. It barely rains, it's scorching hot. By all logic, no civilization should survive there long term, let alone thrive. But the Nabataeans were obsessed with water, almost to a genius level. They built an incredibly advanced hydraulic system, pipes, channels, cisterns, and dams that collected every single drop of rainwater when it did rain and stored it underground for when it didn't. They even engineered flash flood control so that when a heavy storm hit, the water didn't destroy the city. It got directed into their reservoirs. At its peak, Petra's water system could support a population of around 30,000 people. In the desert, thousands of years before modern plumbing. These weren't primitive nomads anymore, these were engineers. Now here's why Petra became one of the most powerful cities in the ancient world. Location. Petra sat right at the crossroads of the most important trade routes on Earth at the time. Spices from Arabia, silk from China, incense from the south, gold, copper, textiles. All of it passed through Nabataean territory on its way to Egypt, Greece, and Rome. And the Nabataeans? They taxed all of it. They became the middlemen of the ancient world. Merchants who wanted to move goods safely across the desert needed the Nabataeans. And the Nabataeans knew it. They charged for safe passage, for water, for food, for rest. Petra essentially became the ancient world's most profitable toll road. At their height, they were minting their own coins, writing in their own script, which, by the way, directly evolved into modern Arabic writing, and trading with civilizations from India to Rome. So how does an empire this powerful just disappear? Here's where it gets interesting, because the Nabataeans didn't actually vanish overnight. It was more of a slow fade. In 106 AD, Rome annexed the Nabataean kingdom, just absorbed it into the empire. And at first, Petra kept going. It was still a city, still had people, still had trade. But then the trade routes started to shift. More goods began moving by sea instead of by land. The overland routes that made Petra rich slowly became less important. The money dried up. Then in 363 AD, a massive earthquake hit. It destroyed large parts of the city. And unlike before, there wasn't enough wealth left to rebuild everything. People started leaving, slowly at first, then more and more. By the 7th century, Petra was mostly abandoned. The desert reclaimed it. The sand drifted in. The carved facades weathered. And the outside world simply forgot it was there. For over 1,000 years, Petra sat hidden in that canyon, known only to the local Bedouin tribes who lived in and around its caves. To the rest of the world, it was a myth, a legend, a city that people weren't even sure was real. Until 1812. That's when a Swiss explorer named Johann Ludwig Burckhardt disguised himself as an Arab pilgrim, convinced a local guide to take him through the narrow canyon pass, and walked out the other side to find an entire lost city waiting for him. He was the first Western outsider to lay eyes on Petra in over a millennium. So did the Nabataeans vanish? Not exactly. They were absorbed, their culture blended into the broader Arab world, and their writing system lived on. It literally became the alphabet Arabic is written in today. But their city, their greatest achievement, went quiet. Petra is now one of the 7 wonders of the modern world. Millions of people visit every year, and those rose-red cliffs that the Nabataeans carved with their bare hands 2,000 years ago are still standing. Not bad for a group of nomads who weren't supposed to survive the desert. If you found this one interesting, drop a comment. Which ancient civilization do you want us to cover next? And if you're new here, this is Stories on Stone. Subscribe so you don't miss the next one. See you in the next story and stay curious.